this afternoon is mainly focusing on grant writing for partnerships with the Global South. The idea comes so that it's a different kind of grant writing. Often in scientific projects, you're more driven by curiosity, things you want to study to understand them better. When you're writing for partnerships for the Global South, most of the financiers in that domain, and we will go over them this afternoon, are often looking more like what's the problem you're going to tackle and how are you going to attack that. So to tackle that problem, we have different speakers, and I'm very happy to present our first keynote speaker, Dr. Francois Swepman, who is a Belgian actually, but has been working all over the world, as he will probably introduce himself, and he will give us a first insight in his experience with working in partnerships with the Global South. So Francois, if that's okay, you can maybe first introduce yourself and then start your sharing your screen.
So basically, I understand that the majority of participants are PhD students or going for additional scholarships. The challenge for the scientists, especially from a Southern perspective, is always the appropriate funding. And what I will try to explain is that there are a lot of challenges. It's linked to the number of funding opportunities available online, the number of donors. I will try in just 10 slides to highlight the constraints, but also the opportunities. What I want to start with a statement. This is a report which was released last week, which comes up with quite harsh statements, and I will try to explain why they conclude such harsh and come up with such harsh recommendations. First question to ask is our funding opportunities appropriate? We are all looking for funding which match our research proposals. It's a global phenomenon. Thousands of researchers are compelled more into spending their time in writing proposals than in their research as such. And apparently there's a serious mismatch between what funders are proposing as opportunities and what researchers want to do. But with the present, I would say, global challenges, we cannot afford that luxury of mismatch and of spending all our time in just writing proposals. And I think for researchers in the South, it's far more challenging because in addition to doing research, they are confronted with 1,001 other problems. And most of the time, they do not get a backup from a international department of relations of the university, which can help them in writing, especially the administrative and financial requirements. Then let's first have an overview of what are the issues with the research funders. And my background for the last 15 years, I've been working in mainly international agricultural research. 20 years ago, I was with the VLIR. So some of you, I guess, have a VLIR scholarship from the University Development Corporation. But for the last 15 years with the European Commission, they have supported a platform which has now like 11,500 members and which has on the blog of this platform called PEPARD, I will give you the reference at the end, there are like 35,000 visits per month. And what is of course most striking is that when we post funding opportunities related to agricultural research, related to climate change, related to biodiversity, this immediately gets a hit of 2,000 reads and will be circulated in many other websites or blogs or whatever. So obviously everybody is looking for funding. But then when you start analyzing them, and I have been mainly involved into the European Commission Development cooperation, but also DG Research and DG Agriculture. DG stands for Directorate General. So for those who are familiar with European Commission funding opportunities, you have presently Horizon 2020. Before you had what was called Framework Program. So you have Framework Program 7, etc. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this covers the last 25 years of research funding, and we talk about a lot of money, basically. I have been looking at it from an African perspective, I would say, because I lived 10 years in Africa and worked with African agricultural research centers in Ghana. There's a forum which is trying to be an umbrella of all those research centers. And from their perspective, of course, there is a lot of frustration. I am giving trainings which would normally take 3 days, and now I'm only given 15 minutes. But if you want to understand European Commission funding, it needs like 2 or 3 days training. First to make you understand the logic, and then especially the financial and administrative requirements. Normally it is very participatory, such type of trainings. And lessons learned from those trainings, I have been listing them up, and inadequate policies, because there is a lot of frustration among researchers saying, look, you, especially when we talk about global research, it's very unrealistic. You are expecting us in 3 years' time to come up with upscalable technologies or with research findings which can be useful for policymakers or which can be useful for the beneficiaries. In this case, for example, farmers or healthcare workers. So the other frustration I'm getting from those attending those trainings is that, my God, this is so complicated, this financial complexity. So people and researchers get quickly disappointed and discouraged, basically. And then when you see, for example, depending on which donor is launching a call, whether it's a bilateral donor from the Dutch or from the Belgians or from the Germans or from the Gates Foundation, you clearly see that they have their, not a hidden agenda per se, but they clearly have their priorities. So in the past years, I had the opportunity to as well attend Bill Gates Foundation funding call writing proposals, and also in Germany. And then basically the way it is done, some 20 experts come together, then they try to come up with what, considering the current status questionis, what are the big issues related to one team. For example, in Seattle, we had a meeting about, when we talk about ICT for agriculture, what are the big needs and what are not only the developmental needs, but what are the research questions. And based on this, a research call is being launched. My another point, donors and aid administrators have short memories. So basically, often it's obvious that who is administrating those research fundings. These are research administrators, not per se actively involved in research. So they are supposed to connect with what has been researched in the past, and based on eventual gaps, try to formulate new research questions. But most of the time, the way business is being done, it's one call after the other, and it is not coordinated. And then from the national perspective, and then I mainly talk for the African continent, I'm seeing more and more African countries like Rwanda, like Burkina Faso, Senegal, Kenya, Nigeria. They come up with their national funding opportunities, which is really welcome, because they try sometimes, like in Senegal, to do the selection of proposals based on a multi-stakeholder group. So they would have in the selection committee not only researchers or administrators of research funding, but also the government representative, and also eventually farmer representatives and the private sector. Now, trying to match the global to the south, I think most of the participants, although I have the impression it's 50-50, half of this participants of this webinar are Belgians and the rest is international. Now, there is a mismatch, and I'm seeing a worrying evolution whereby in the past, how were research proposals submitted and written, often these were senior or even retired professors from Belgium remembering their PhD students and asking their PhD student back home in their home country, well, here I have a funding opportunity from the VLIR or another funding opportunity. Would you like to participate? And then there is a co-writing. But in the different trainings, I was able to co-facilitate. And for example, last year I was in Lebanon, where I had 20 Syrian agricultural scientists, idem for Tunis and for Morocco. And I also attended a training in Cairo. So the majority of researchers said, look, we have such an exciting research proposal, we have clear ideas, but we do not know how to connect with a northern researcher from Europe, Canada, or whatever. And Google search is not helpful because this leads you to all directions. And if they don't have a specific tie with a European researcher because they have been studying abroad in a European research center, it's very difficult to connect. And then, but I'm sure you are aware of this, there are so many proposals being submitted. Talking about, again, European Commission, development cooperation has simply stopped with launching global calls, because when they launch a global call on food security, for example, they would get something like 1,200 proposals, while the funding available would only be 20. So this makes it incredibly frustrating for the donor organizing such a round of calls, because all the time and energy and at the end money is put into reviewing, and especially with ex ante selection criteria. What I mean by ex ante selection criteria is that they want the researcher to put into his proposal indicators of achievements. So what is expected to be achieved with a specific research. It is very rare to see a donor putting time into ex post evaluation criteria, which would mean that you consider and review and read a proposal based on what has already been done by other research groups. Luckily, when I see the profile of the reviewers, whether they are working for the Gates Foundation or the European Commission, normally they have a very strong authority, and they would know this. They would know what is in a specific field. They would know exactly what is the status of the research, and they can contrast it. But this is not the case for the administrators, who at the end, when they have received the advices of the scientists who are into the review panel, may sometimes disregard it or take other criteria into consideration. And I mention here now which criteria this could be, because a research scientist, when he is a reviewer of a proposal, of your proposal, he will of course look onto science or scientific excellence. But from a development perspective, and even from a research perspective, more and more, you will find that we can no more afford that luxury of just doing research for research. You will always be asked, what is the impact on development? What do we talk about infrastructure? What do we talk about health? What do we talk about? I've noted somebody of the participants is working on 2 caterpillars. Or microbiome. You have to be able to demonstrate how this research will contribute to a specific developmental problem. Another complexity is that you have to involve non-research stakeholders, whether you are in health or agriculture. Make sure in the writing of your proposal you can convincingly demonstrate towards the reviewers that indeed the either private sector, agribusiness, or farm organizations or other constituents like policymakers have been involved into translating the developmental problem into a research question. Also very important is upscaling opportunities. Be able to demonstrate how a finding, a research outcome, or an eventual technology which you hope to develop out of your research, how this can be upscaled. And then comes up the what I call the 4 A's, awareness, advantage, affordability, and access. At least you should reflect in your proposal, indicate what is the awareness of the problem beyond the researchers. So it is about the end beneficiaries. What is for them the advantage of following, for example, a new variety of seeds or a new biopesticide, for example? What is their advantage? Big question, which is often overlooked, is the affordability. Can people, simple people, especially when we talk about agricultural research, can farmers afford it? And then, of course, access. I give you an example. I've been working on the issue of aflatoxin, mycotoxins, on especially maize and groundnut for some years. And there you would see that, especially on those 4 criteria, research proposals often fail, because when they come up with biocontrol agents, for example, for combating mycotoxins at soil level, they are not able to indeed demonstrate that the awareness is there, that the advantage of using this biocontrol agent would indeed make a big difference. And then we talk about the revenue for farmers. And then what has to be demonstrated, if you go global, if you do not only stay into your small silo, you want to go south, basically, then you have to be able to demonstrate, look, it's not just paying lip service to the south. And this is a very big frustration, because normally I would start my trainings by asking and trying to challenge my audience, asking who does it benefit, this research funding, and when a specific research is funded. And almost everybody in the room, whether they are from Egypt, from Namibia, or from Ghana, they would always say it is benefiting the donor, or it is benefiting the northern researcher. So the perception is that it's mainly a kind, not a hidden agenda, but the research question, especially from the donor side, is put in the north. And my 3 days challenge is then try to contradict this, to demonstrate, look, it is true what you all say. It is very complicated, it is very administrative, it is very competitive, but when you manage to be part of such an international consortium, this is a unique experience, and you really should go for it. Because what I would always use in my trainings is a number of video interviews of 3 minutes, 2 minutes of researchers from Africa, from Europe, or whatever, who are just witnessing about what it is to be in such a research consortium, what it has asked from them, but then also the reward. So my conclusion would be definitely going for global funding opportunities is more than worth. But we talk about access to research funding now. It is not easy for new researchers or for young researchers to access funding. And now this is my last slide. This is for me the elephant in the room, because more and more we talk about multidisciplinarity or multidisciplinary research proposals, but this has been going on for the last 20, 30 years. I have heard this music. We need to have multidisciplinary research. I have heard this for the last 20 years, but it's still, there is either reluctancy from a research perspective, but also to overcome disciplines and overcome those silos is quite a challenge. But I think today we don't have a choice, because we are all seeing our planet is degrading. We are seeing a problem of biodiversity, climate change, etc. So it's very important to try as an individual researcher. If you want to go global, you have to follow the international agenda. You have to follow what are the new upcoming themes. Like for the European Union, it's the Green Deal. I'm sure you heard about it. When we talk about agricultural research in Africa, it's about creating employment, agribusiness, etc. We are also seeing now that what I call political economy, a research proposal needs to be able to capture the issue of how will this reduce poverty? How will this be inclusive? Inclusivity means involving gender, involving youth, involving the poor, etc., involving also the disabled or HIV, how it is addressing those typical publics which are excluded. Of course, it's easier to say it than to put it in a proposal, because being inclusive, working for the poorest, that is not so evident when you talk about high-level type of research. It's not easy to demonstrate how it can tackle or how it will involve them. And then a very important issue in the proposal is the communication. Especially now with COVID-19, it's about mitigation of risks of upcoming zoonotic diseases, but also risk communication. And risk communication means when, for example, you come up with ideas or technologies or findings from our research, how will you communicate about this? I give you one short example, again, coming back to mycotoxins and aflatoxins. If you communicate with farmers about the danger of having his maize moldy, because moldy maize or moldy groundnuts will be the major cause in Africa for cancer and also of stunting. If you communicate this to your beneficiaries, then without giving any solution which is affordable, this becomes morally a very dangerous game. So you have to know how to communicate risks, and this should be written in your proposals. My last slide is, I've sent you last week what I think will be a low-hanging fruit for most of us, is this, what I find a powerful platform called Dimensions, because we talk about millions of articles which have been compiled through this platform, and they are tracing for every scientific article what is the funding origin. So talking about finding in your discipline, who is active in your discipline, and where does this professor or researcher find his fund, this is a one-stop go, I would say, to invest, to explore. I myself only recently discovered it, and I wonder whether donors will use this platform to also sharpen their future call for proposals. If you are an agricultural scientist, and I've noted that some of you are into veterinary scientists or health or agriculture, then I would say go to Terra Viva grants. You can Google for it, because Terra Viva grant is kept by the former director of research of ICRAF, based in Nairobi. ICRAF stands for the Agroforestry Research Center, and he's now retired. He's an American living in Paris, and he's with his team keeping up all the funding opportunities related to, as it says, Terra Viva, so climate change, agriculture, etc. And last but not least, the platform I'm still facilitating, which has like 36,000 visits per month, is a platform funded by European Commission. But again, it's mainly Africa, Europe, and on agriculture. So I did not manage to read the chat, but let me read the chat and end here.
It's okay, Francois. There is no questions yet in the chat. Well, let me thank you for giving us like a broad view of working with donors of funding for projects with the Global South. I think sometimes it was maybe not very encouraging. I would try to. You will hear me back at the end of this webinar. I mean, I'm really trying to get people enthusiastic to work with the Global South. But I think at least for the participants of today, today, what is already something very important that Francois was mentioning is that it's very important to, if you're here for your PG and you're going to back home, to keep the network going on with your promoter here, with your professor here, with the people you met also in other countries, because ultimately it's that network that will help you to be able to have some grants. I see we have somebody was raising the hand to ask a question. Sorry, I don't see it on my screen. Maybe Francois, you can also probably close your presentation, and then I will be able to see it better. So if you have a question, you're free to put your hand and asked you, you had a question, so you can maybe put your video for a moment and your microphone.
Actually, it's regarding dimensions. Last week I have attended one webinar on dimensions, and I have a question. How could we publish through dimensions? Is it like for free, or it should be supported by the university itself?
It is open access.
Yeah, open access, but for publishing, is there any fees for publishing or not? Because for other like platforms like Web of Science or Elsevier, if you need to get open access publication, you have to pay like a fee for the publisher.
No, in this case, I understand that also the reviewers do it for free, so it is open access, and it is, you don't have to subscribe, and it's free publishing.
Yeah, good to know. Thanks.
Okay, Ilse, I see you have a question, and as you can put your hand back down, so then we know that your question was answered. Ilse?
Yes, if I may just ask, I think these trainings you organize in the South are extremely valuable, but I was just wondering, if I may, in what context you are actually providing those? Is that part of a bigger project, or can anyone apply to have some of these trainings organized? Or?
So the European Commission has what they call national contact points. You would have in a number of African countries, but also in Europe, in every European country actually, NCP, national contact points. And they are funded by European Commission. So the national contact point in Belgium would be able to tell you when trainings are being organized. Now for Africa, not every African country has such a national contact point, but what the European Commission is doing is that this training opportunity to sub-regional umbrella. You have an animal called FARA, Forum of Agricultural Research in Africa, based in Ghana. So they would invite FARA to organize such a training. And then some consultants would be called to give this training in Ghana or another country. And for the last year, for example, I was based in Cairo, and there I was employed for the International Center for Agricultural Research for Dry Areas, so covering North Africa and Middle East. And this is a specific region because the agriculture is about how can you in desertified areas, which type of research is a priority. Also there, the European Commission, but it's another program, it's called the PRIMA program, which stands for the Program of Research and Innovation in the Mediterranean area. The PRIMA Secretariat is based in Spain, in Madrid, if I'm not wrong, and they will, on a regular basis, organize in the North African and Middle East countries trainings.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you also for you. So I just put back the program Francois, as a kind of way to say that maybe it's time to move on to our next speaker. Thank you again. And anyway, in the end, there will be still time to answer some questions. Francois will stay the whole time with us, but I think also here in the other presentations will help you to get an overview of everything. So, Bruno, Professor Levesque, if I'm correct, can you present, can you take over the screen from me and put your presentation? Thank you for that. And of course, put on your microphone.
Both should be on, correct?
All right, yes.
So good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Bruno, and as you can see from my slides, I'm affiliated with the Department of Virology, Parasitology, and Immunology of the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine. And I was asked to just give some experiences with funding bodies. And as you can see, from FWO to Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I split my presentation in 4 topics. I will briefly start just by highlighting my research area, because it's a bit important to also conflict with the funding bodies who are supporting my research. And then I'll share with the top 3 funding bodies. I will share with some experiences I have with bodies. And I'll end my presentations with some tips and tricks. So what's my research area? So I've been the last decade, I've been working on neglected tropical diseases. And it's a group of parasitic, viral, and bacterial diseases that affect the poorest communities in the global south. And that's why they are neglected, because some of those diseases can be cured by a simple and cheap treatment. And one common surprise, based on their names, it's not the north that is affected, but it's really the global south that is affected. And here on the color codes, the only thing that you need to note is that in the north, it's all white, indicating that these diseases are absent. And in the global south, you can see going from yellow to red, indicating that a variety of countries are affected by multiple of these diseases. And I want to make this clear, because what I would like to make the point here is that I'm working on a research topic that's basically irrelevant from the north, but still I would like to highlight that I'm still attracting funding bodies, funds from funding bodies from the north. So who is funding my research? And for this presentation, I just dived into some of the latest funding bodies. So this is from, I would say, the last decade, so starting from 2010. And I made a pie chart from it. And on the right, you can see the different funding bodies. On top, we have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, followed by Ghent University and FWO. Johnson & Johnson is a pharmaceutical industry. The World Health Organization and Vliet US, I think these speak for themselves. But what's striking is that basically that I've been, well, out, with the exception from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, majority of my funds come from Belgium. So Ghent University and FWO. So I would like to discuss each of them. So the top 3, each of them in the next following slides. And I'll start with the Gates Foundation. So the Gates Foundation, they have a variety of funding opportunities, and one of those, the most well-known, are the global grant challenges. So what's this? This is a $100,000 US grant where you address an important challenge, and the challenge is defined by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In essence, it's only a few pages, so it's not really a lot of work. But we were not successful. We tried 4 times and we never succeeded. And is it because of bad projects? Likely. But I also think that we have to acknowledge that we are a small player and that we're not from the US. Although it's not explicitly mentioned, my experience is that, or at least my feeling is that when it comes to rewarding the grants, is that the geography of the applicant is quite important. How did I achieve, or how did we achieve this Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation projects? Is through networking. Basically, this was not an official call. Rather, there was through networking. There was a need created. So let's take us back up to a few years, and this goes back to 2012. At that time, Joseph Kreuzer was the head of the lab, and he was coordinating the WHO Collaborating Center for Monitoring anthelmintic efficacy against solid plasmid helminths. In a nutshell, we were just assessing the efficacy against intestinal worms in children. And through a variety of international meetings organized by the WHO, we came in contact with Julie Jacobson, which was at that time the senior program officer at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. A small note, the director of neglected tropical diseases at WHO, Dirk Engels, is in Belgium, and both were good friends. So Joseph and Dirk were good friends. So basically this idea was made in a bar, and through support, of course, through variety of broader group consensus, this idea, or this we were asked to develop a concept note. A concept note, and that was 2014. So a 4-page concept note, and you can see at the end it took us more than 1 year to finally get a signed contract. And why did it took us so long to get a contract? Is because there was there is an open discussion with the Bill and Melinda Foundation. It's not that you propose something and that's accepted. No, you propose something and there is a discussion among the different program officers for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Of course, there was a long negotiation on budget, and we had some troubles with politics between partners, among the partners from the project. And there was also quite a lot of change in program officers. So I will come back to that later. But Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was at that time quite a young organization, and there was a high turnover of different people. But at least we got the contract in November 2015. So what are the advantages with working with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation? Well, as I said before, it's an open communication, and it really helps to narrow down the needs from the Gates Foundation and align it with your own research. It also provides a first-line information. So you're really up to the people that are making the calls, which obviously has an advantage because it creates new funding bodies. And finally, they're hyper flexible. What I mean is that I have been postponing the end of my grant 3 times. And now I was just asked, okay, when do you want to stop the grant? And I said, well, given the COVID, let's make it end of 2022. And initially, the grant was planned to end by last year. What are the important disadvantages? It's a growing funding body. So there's a lot of changes in their hierarchy, a lot of changes also in ideas. It's good to give advice, but that does not always guarantee funds. To give a concrete example, we had some plans or we had some ideas that we shared with the program officer, but that idea was then rewarded to another grantee. So it's not always good to have first-line information. The flexibility also a bit requires a lot of reorienting research. If the data doesn't really provide the information that we were anticipating, you're requested to go back to the whiteboard and redraw your research. And that sometimes comes with hard decision making. If you would start writing a grant, it's highly important that you commit to the open access. Basically, that's one of the requirements within the grant agreement It's a global access. Everything you generate should be made publicly available. And it's quite important to pitch the impact. What will you change? And it's not a minor change in a certain area, in a certain country. No, we're looking at a higher level, at the country level, or sometimes on the continent level. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is not really keen if you mention PhD scholarship. So don't mention it. And it's not really explicit capacity building. They want to make the change, but they just want to pay for it, what it makes the change. But I've put no in between brackets because I will come down to that later. In a way, you could be creative by recruiting young scientists and then paying them PhD scholarship through other funds. So don't mention it explicitly, but bear in mind that it could be an opportunity to create new PhD scholarships. I'll move towards FWO, and I've listed here on the left, I listed all the different grant opportunities that I have been applying for, going from an international coordination action plan, PhD scholarships, grants for long stay abroad, and postdoctoral fellowships. And you will see that we are successful in attracting funds and basically also supporting that majority of the funds to do my research is actually paid by the North and not by a big international funding body. The International Coordination Action Plan can be easily justified or can be easily explained by the fact that we have been WHO Collaborating Center since 2009. Another thing I would like to highlight is that the review board, I would say, is MET 8, and I'm not sure, but I have the feeling that this review board is less competitive than the others, which could also explain why we have been successful in achieving these grants. Another message I would like to give is that each of these grants, although they might have a separate use, they're all connected. So I'm using these funds interconnectively to ensure that I achieve the goals. What I've learned of FWO is that it's important that it's embedded in research community, and there it's important to also highlight the added value for the Flemish research community. Definitely linked to international policy, and we could always link up with the WHO policy, so that was rather easy for us. For postdoctoral mandates and also for PhD mandates, it's important that you include a trip to another institute. So traveling to abroad is always an important asset. A detailed plan, so provide details on what you exactly want to do, including sample size calculations, and science communication. I think limiting your science communication to the papers is not really what they want to see. I will always add it something on going to schools and have information sessions with first graders. Now I'll dive into the Ghent University, and basically all of the funds that I've been able to attract from Ghent University are linked to special research funds, particularly those for doctoral scholarships for candidates from developing countries. And I've applied for 4, and I've been able to win 3 of them, and that's a very high success rate because it's very competitive. And I contribute my success to 3 points. So first of all, you need to have an existing collaboration with the home institute, and a good proof is that you have a common paper. Second is that the candidate has already published in an international peer-reviewed literature. And finally, and don't forget this, personal and detailed recommendation letter. Basically, the dose for which I was successful, I already knew the candidate for many years. So I've put a lot of effort in writing a personal and detailed recommendation letter. The only time that we missed the grant application was there was no existing collaboration. We didn't know the candidate, and the candidate didn't have an international peer literature. So I think these three rules of thumb are the way to success. I will end up with some tips and tricks. What I've trying to do is make small investments, and some of the investments seems irrelevant, but they turned out to be quite important. And one of the things that I've been doing during my postdoctoral fellowship was making tutorials of laboratory procedures. And this tutorial in particular was a procedure that we taped in Ethiopia, where one of my colleagues here in Ethiopia demonstrated how to process a stool sample. And just look at how many times it have been viewed. It's about 35,000 times, and that's quite a lot for just seeing a procedure on how to make a smear of stool. And these kind of tutorials are picked up by major funding bodies too, and even by WHO. So it not only helps to standardize the procedures in the lab, but it also gives some visibility of your work. Investment in master students or in small surveys, I think is also important, particularly if you want to link it up with the PhD scholarship, the sandwich scholarship from the UGent I just mentioned. In this particular example for Daniel, he had a very small data set on intestinal worms in kindergartens. And again, it's a small survey, but we managed to get it published as a short communication. And this, of course, was an asset value because I could prove I had collaboration with Daniel. Daniel could prove he had a first paper, and I knew Daniel already for quite a long time. So he was awarded a scholarship in 2018. Share your material and expertise as much as possible. I also highlighted by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Here you can see a screenshot of our project website, and where we combined all our visual tutorials or our study documents. We also developed some online tools, and we even have a sample inventory. And this website has been used as an example throughout the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, because again, they really appreciate that you are sharing all the material that you have. And you don't need to do it through websites. We are also attaching all of the different standard operating procedures, as you can see here, as supplementary data in our publications. And I think also combining projects, as I mentioned, for FWO, but also for the funding bodies. As I said, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is not really keen for having PhD scholarships, but there are other opportunities through Ghent or to VLIR-US to provide scholarships, and then Bill and Melinda Gates is supporting the field work, and then VLIR-US is providing the scholarship, and you are at the end of the row, at the end of the line, you're able to provide the expected outcome. So that was it. Very brief. If there would be any questions, please put them in the chat, or I'm more than happy to take them after this session. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Bruno. That was very informative. I take home from you, if I want to have somebody have a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they should go to the bar more often, which is a bit difficult with these Corona times. But I understand, basically, for me, it means it's about networking. It's about making sure that people know you and know what important work you're doing. And that's very important. Maybe I have a first question for you, actually. In your Bill and Melinda Gates, in the end, do you have a partner from the US?
We have partners from Canada, but we don't have partners from the US. At that time, the expertise that we had was really already quite acknowledged. So we had partners from Switzerland, from Italy, and then of course a number of partners in the global south.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. Are there any more questions? Because I just put on the screen that actually you were talking about the global grant challenges. There is a call open right now, but if you didn't make it in 4 calls, so maybe it's not such an interesting suggestion. But anyway, are there any more questions from somebody, or we wait till the end of the whole webinar? I don't see any hands or any questions. So in that case, I suggest we move on to our next speaker. Thank you again. Oh, sorry, Valentine, you have a question? You can put on your, yeah.
Yes, I have a question about managing the constraints you can meet while in the journal of submitting your proposal. Thank you for your good presentation. In the middle, you mentioned that you discussed with the officer for the funder. Then at the end, your idea was not funded, but it was funded by another person. How do you manage that? If it is your innovative idea, then at the end you find that for you, you didn't fund it, and another person was funded for your own idea. Thank you.
So I'm not sure whether you're referring to that I had an idea for the funding body, and that I was not funded by, basically they funded someone else, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And can you rephrase your question a bit?
Yes, I said that if you discussed with the program officer in a certain donor, and then your idea, you submitted it, and then you find that it was not funded, and they fund someone else, like with a similar project. How do you manage that?
Okay. First of all, the idea was to have this virtual inventory of samples. So basically, it was, in a way, it was granted through us. But it was not really a major outcome from our grant, and it was also something that was, I would say, that was not on top of our priority list. And I've noticed that indeed it was granted to another institute. It is also granted for looking to more diseases. We are just looking at one particular disease, and they are granted to look at all the neglected tropical diseases. So we are only looking at a small thing of it. So at the end, I was a bit surprised, honestly, but I was not mad or I was not angry. I was just like, okay, good. And at the end, I think it was a good choice, because at the end, I don't think we would be able to take it at that level that the other partners are able to do.
So is that like a message, like sometimes you have to give a little bit and get good friends back anyway?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, it was not on our priority list, so it didn't have any major impact on us. If it would have, I would make a fuss about it, but at this point in time, right. Thank you for the question, Valentine.
Okay. Thank you. What is your advice for us who are young in grant writing, who are growing up and we didn't know the field there and what's going on? Sometimes maybe you be open, you try to explain to them what you want to do to see that you can make it innovative and attractive to the donor to give you the funds.
Yeah, I was lucky, Valentine. I was very much lucky that I was at the right time, that this coalition with my supervisor, basically, and then the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was made. So I was just lucky. But I think it comes back to the tricks I gave you. I think with small things like an MSc student, if you're supervising an MSc student, to make it, to get it published. Even if it's just a short communication, that's fine, but at least it adds up to your expertise, to your CV, and it also creates opportunities if you're looking at scholarships. And connecting to people, I think working on your own is not, that's not something we do anymore these times. I think really reaching out to people who have expertise and to link up with them as much as possible. And sometimes you will fail, and sometimes you're lucky, and you will have success.
Okay. So thank you again, Bruno, for your talk and very interesting sharing of ideas. I would like to pass on now to the next speaker, which is Delphine. Delphine Kloet. So Delphine, you can prepare to present your presentation. And Delphine will mainly talk, well, I will let her explain herself.
Thank you, Nancy. I was just wondering, because I noticed at UST, you're raising your hand. I don't know if you still have a question or if it is an old hand from a previous question, just to avoid any confusion. But I guess it's okay. Okay, let me first share my screen. Voila. Is it okay? Everybody sees?
No.
Not yet.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay, so good afternoon. So my name is Delphine. I work at the International Relations Office at Ghent University for 15 years, where I was involved in European projects. At the time, it was Tempus, then it was Erasmus Mundus. Now it's in the Erasmus Plus program. I've also did some assignments as external evaluator for the European Commission, so reviewing project proposals. And so in the recent years, I was involved in supporting promoters, giving advice on how to write proposals, how to submit, and then also being directly involved myself in the implementation of some projects. But today I want to keep it quite general and really talk about how to turn your idea into a project. Of course, this is an ambitious statement. Let's just say this is usually something which you have to do in a 1 or 2 day workshop, like Francois mentioned earlier. We only have 20 minutes, so it will be very short, but at least some tools or some tips to get you started. The idea is not that we're going to talk about funding, about the donors or specific programs, but I just want to mention that at the International Relations Office, we are managing the Erasmus Plus program, which is the EU education, training, youth and sport. You're all familiar probably with the Horizon 2020 program, which is the EU program for research, but know or be aware that there is also a program dedicated to education. And of course, everybody, when we say Erasmus, everybody thinks about mobility and students and staff going on exchange in Europe. But the program also offers opportunities for cooperation between universities in different actions. So it's not only mobility, it's also projects in Erasmus+. And just like Horizon, who is starting a new program next year onwards, that is the same for Erasmus. Voila. What else was I going to say? Yeah, why Erasmus Plus? Because there are different actions in that program. And why is there a session included about Erasmus Plus here today? That's because there's one action which is called capacity building in higher education, which is focusing on cooperation with partner countries outside the EU. So from Russia to Africa to Latin America to Asia, Middle East, Western Balkans, you name it. So it has a very broad scope and quite a high success rate. The overall success rate is about 20%, which is quite high. So there are some opportunities there also for professors and researchers. Don't go too much into detail of the program. You can find more information online or ask me or my colleagues. But I wanted to mention this. Why? Because overall, the EU and the member states jointly, they are collectively actually the world's leading donor. They are providing more than 50% of all global development aid. So it's an important donor. So it's not to be ignored, let's just say. And of course, Erasmus Plus, it's only small of this, but we want to encourage promoters to combine funds, to start small and then grow towards more ambitious proposals. So you can start with a small VLIR project, and then often we see that in practice, one project is leading to another. These networks are really helping you further, getting you into new networks, into new proposals. So often there's like this kind of snowball effect. And it's interesting to know that there's a lot of funding donors out there, which you can try. Okay, but then we're talking about projects today. So my main aim today is to provide you with some practical tools and tips, which you can use for different donors. So in a minute, we will zoom in on how to get started. But maybe just first something very shortly about projects and project design, just to set the frame a little bit. So it's very quiet here. I hope everybody is still with me. Yes.
Yes, Delphine, everything is
is. So what is a project, or at least how do we perceive a project? Project is a series of activities which is aimed at bringing about clearly specified objectives within a defined time period and with a defined budget. So there you have the main issue, or the main aspects of a project. Of course, also important in a project are your stakeholders. What are stakeholders? Actually, these are people, individuals or groups, or they can be institutions, which may have a significant interest in the success or in the failure of your project. They can either be people who are implementing or who are facilitating your proposal, who are beneficiary, or even might be adversaries of your idea, of your project proposal. Besides the stakeholders, very important to have clear coordination, management and financing arrangements. And thirdly, also to have a good monitoring system to oversee and to follow the implementation and to support your project management once your proposal would be selected. But now, how to get started? How to start? You have an idea, and already it was, of course, mentioned that it's not the same as in a research project. In a development cooperation context, the start of your idea, you start with a clear problem or a need in a partner country, which you have to then describe and underpin with evidence in your application, right? You have to refer to some statistics, to policies, to studies. You have to clearly define your target groups. So this is very important that you describe this in your proposal. Usually this is in the relevance section. And it's a problem to which you can contribute with your expertise. So often what we see is that people start from their research or their expertise, and then they like want to export this to another setting or another context, where actually it's the other way around, right? You start with this problem, with this need, and then you see how you can contribute with your expertise. So we would advise against like just trying to export your research or your expertise, but really look at the problem or the need. And what is important that you, of course, that you address a need, don't create one. And I posted here the cover of a book, The Baby Killer, with just referring to an example. I don't know if you heard about this. In the 70s, there was a big scandal, the baby milk scandal. The company Nestle was accused of causing infant illness and death in poor communities in developing countries because they were promoting bottle feeding. And they were even working via the hospitals, providing them with free samples, with promotional materials to give to mothers in developing countries. And of course, these mothers thought, oh, this is material coming from the West. We have to use this. So they were starting to bottle feed their children instead of just breastfeeding them. And then an additional problem was that a lot of these mothers, when they were going home, didn't have access to clean water, which is of course needed when you want to use milk powder, right? So they were having babies with serious health problems because actually there was a need. There was no need in these countries for bottle milk. It was something out of commercial interests, which was like imported. So it's not the idea that you create a need, but that you address an existing need, right? That's the example I wanted to give. Also try to avoid surprises. I really know what is the current situation. Often the best way to do this is really to involve your partners from the South. They of course have a clear idea usually on what the situation is, but even if you do that, we once had a project. It was a Tempus project, I think, at the time, and the aim was setting up international relations offices. In the Western Balkans, they were starting to have more mobility, more exchanges, so they needed international offices to manage this, and we were going to train staff and buy materials and so on, and make sure that there was software databases. And then at the kickoff meeting, actually, we found out that at one of the universities, there was already an international office and there was already one staff member working on this. So this wasn't a huge problem, but still it was very much a surprise to the EU partners and to the French coordinator that actually there was already an international office in place, whereas we were describing in the project proposal that there was nothing yet, and so we were going to set this up. So it can be a bit annoying, of course, when you start the project and then you find out, yeah, the thing we were describing is not really reflecting the real situation there. So that was an example. And then, of course, the main idea or the main advice I wanted to give you when you start writing or when you start with your project proposal is that you should first analyze and then plan. Usually what we see is people start immediately with writing proposals and they only have 1 or 2 months between the launching of the call and then there's a deadline, so you have to be very fast. But then you skip a very important phase, which is the analysis of different aspects. So it's a warm to say reminder or advice to don't skip this phase and make sure that you have a clear analysis. Another example which I could give is that we had a project where they were going to, well, it was not an Erasmus Plus project, it was something different, but still trying to show you how important the analysis is. It was a setting up of a beer brewing company in Cambodia. And they found out that actually the site where they're going to put the plant, the factory, the beer brewery, didn't have access to clear water, which is indispensable if you want to brew beer. So they found out, okay, no, I had to find a new location. Then they were going to build it on top of a hill where there was clear water. But then they found out, yeah, but the installations and the tanks and the machines that we need for this brewing company is so heavy. It's not feasible to build it on a hill. It will not, the construction works are not sufficient enough. So they had to come down the hill again. So these are things, of course, if you run into aspects like that, when you're already starting your project proposal, it's not good. So it's always good to make clear analysis at the start so you don't have a lot of big surprises once you start implementing your project. That's a bit what I wanted to say. Of course, this project idea, which fits a problem or a need in this part and country, it still has to be competitive, right? You want the funder to fund your idea, so you have to convince them why they should fund you. What are important steps in this respect. Of course, it has to fit with the objectives of the program, with the priorities and the requirements of the funder. So you have to make sure that you read the program guide, that you are aware, that you read the call, that you know what are the award criteria. You have to know the program and, of course, the ideas of the funder. What does the funder want to achieve? And not only what is my specific field of expertise. Be innovative. So in comparison with other existing projects, you can check this. There's an Erasmus Plus project results platform, but I'm sure that also for other funders, there's a way to check if there are any similar projects. You can check with these national contact points, which Francois mentioned, EU delegations. Your partners probably might also have information. So it's good to map a little bit to see what is already ongoing and how you could maybe complement that. Also important, the support of your institution or your faculty. Try to make use of existing experience. People within the organization, especially in Ghent University, I would say, who have experience, who know the program, who have experience with projects. Probably in your faculty as well, professors who have experience, who could give you tips and so on. So please make use of this and don't have the feeling that you are alone in your start of your ideas. And ideally, of course, also your project ideas should reflect the strategy or the internationalization strategy, depends a bit on the topic of your institution, of the faculty and of your partners. Of course, you have to find the right partners and the project has to be relevant to everybody in the consortium, and you need to match expertise with the needs and so on. So make sure that you have the right partners then to involve in your idea. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom out a little bit. We talked about the funding agency. It's important to know a little bit how they are thinking, what their aims are, what their objectives are. So just a few slides. I won't go too much into detail because it's a little bit of theory. That's project cycle management and the logical framework approach. This approach is often used with many donors in development cooperation or capacity building. So this project cycle management, what is this? You could say it's a primary set of project design and management tools. This was used by a lot of donors in the past, also in United States. And then in the 90s, the European Commission implemented this also for their use. And project cycle management, you could say this is the whole of management activities and decision-making procedures which are used during the whole life cycle of a project. And you see here the different steps. I won't go too much into detail. But for instance, the programming, this is the phase where the donor really analyzes the situation in a specific country in consultation with the authorities there to see what are the needs, what are the problems, what are the opportunities which we could address by funding cooperation between institutions, right? So usually this results like in country strategy papers, national indicative programs. And this is important to know because you should refer to this, right? Your project idea should fit into this bigger picture, into this bigger policies of the donor. So it's important that you check these kind of documents, these strategy papers and so on, and that you refer to them in the relevance section. And that you respond to the priorities that they set, of course. And then the second step is the identification. This is where the donor or you as well, you identify project ideas which are in line with these objectives, which were set in the programming phase. And then in order to identify the relevance and the feasibility of your project idea, there are a number of aspects which you should analyze. The program and the policy is one thing, but also the stakeholders, the problem, of course, very important. What the exact problem, what are other initiatives or lessons learned, what are the strategies and resources available, and so on. That's identification phase. And then a formulation phase, this is really where you start to prepare your detailed project plan to present to the funding body. The other steps I won't go into detail. That's of course, once you start your project, you implement it. During at the end, there will be evaluation and audits, and of course the lessons learned during this evaluation go back to the programming phase, right? The donor wants to learn from lessons learned in the different projects to see, should we adapt, should we change things for the next phases of the program. So that's a little bit the bigger picture, let's just say. And then of course this project cycle management was that the projects are. So what does it mean? Relevant, it means, well, they are in line, of course, with these needs, with these policies. Feasible means that it's well designed, it will deliver sustainable benefits so that you have clear objectives, a good work plan, a clear budget, your monitoring is clear. So all your different aspects within your project are well designed. And then effective, of course, they want to make sure that you are delivering the benefits that you have anticipated and that you are managing the projects in a good way. But so for today, I really want to focus on the identification, the idea, and how to turn this, how to formulate this into a project idea. The logical framework approach, this is actually like of this project cycle management. That's a kind of like an analytical process which helps you to organize information in a structured way, because there's a lot of different how to say, a lot of different aspects in these ideas, and you have to put them all together in one big plan, one big summary of your project proposal. And this logical framework approach is something which can help you on how to reach your goal. And there are two phases. There's an analytical phase, like I said before, first analyze, then plan, right? There's an analytical phase and there's a planning phase. And what you will see as a tool or an instrument in a lot of project proposals, not only in capacity building in Erasmus+, but probably also in VLIR, maybe also in Europe Aid, is a logical framework matrix. That's the product of your whole planning process. So if you did all the analysis, you are able to formulate it in a way which is visible in a matrix where all the key elements of your project plan are. And actually, this is like the summary of your project proposal. This is the start. And then you can start developing the other aspects in your project proposal, like the budget and the detailed activities, your work plan, and so on. But our advice is to start really with this logical framework matrix once you have done the analysis. Okay, so what to say in this analytical phase? In the analytical phase, different aspects. First of all, the problem, like we already stated clearly, this is the start of everything, clear problem analysis. And analysis of the objectives. What are your goals? What do you want to achieve with your project? Also stakeholder analysis and analysis of strategies. The strategies, this is how to define what will be in the scope of your project, because you cannot tackle everything with one single project. Of course, you will have to make a choice on what will be a project. All these different analyses are interconnected, right? If you don't involve your stakeholders, it will be hard to define their needs or their problems. It will also be more difficult to define what are any possible solutions for this, okay? And then in the problem analysis, actually what you will be doing, and we will come back to this in the next session, so don't worry, it will become a little bit more concrete. I will give examples. The problem analysis, this identifies the negative aspects of the existing situation, and this also establishes what is the cause and effect relationship. What is the reason and what is the consequence? And this is the basis on which you can then develop your objectives, right? Then you will turn it around and then you say you describe the situation in the future once you have tackled these problems. And then you specify what is the hierarchy of your objectives. Which objectives can we reach with the project and which ones can we contribute to, but we cannot reach them with our project alone. And then once you made your analysis, then you go to the planning phase and then you start writing your logical framework matrix. We'll come back to that. And then only after you do this logical framework matrix, then you can set indicators, do your budget, and develop all the work packages and your work plan, your real project design. But first you need your foundation, right? And this is a tool. Actually, I was giving a workshop last year at a conference on how to submit a successful proposal. And this was something which many participants found very useful. And it's a kind of general tool which you can use for a lot of donors and a lot of projects. So I thought it might be relevant for today. What you can do is use a problem tree. And so you see here a actual picture tree, right? Where you have the trunk, the core problem, which you want to identify. The branches of the tree are then the reasons or the causes of this core problem, and then the branches, sorry, are on top, of course. The branches are the effects or the consequences you have faced because of this core problem, and then the roots are the reasons or the causes of your core problem. Now, there's a nice YouTube video on that you can watch later on. I just mentioned the link here. We'll skip this one. Give an example. Yes.
Just to ask you maybe to wrap up in about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So to give you an example, say limit PhD training opportunities in medicine in Western Kenya, then you could say, okay, what could be the problem? What could be the reasons for this? Yeah, and these are actually in my other notes, so I don't have them here. The idea was I was going to ask input, but we don't have enough time for this. So I'll just skip this. Once you have developed this problem tree, and you can really do this with your stakeholders in a group session, in a workshop with post-its, try to visualize this. Everybody can give their input on what is the reasons of the problem and what are the effects of the problem. And then you can determine on which ones are we going to tackle with the project. So the problem tree can then be turned into an objective tree. So the effects that you are listing can be put into a wider objective. This is a goal on the longer term, which you can contribute to with your project, but you will never reach with your project alone. The core problem is what you will attack or tackle with your project, and the reasons, these are things which you can will be turned into outputs, right? So just to give you an example, the wider objective, this is something in general. The specific objective, this is what your project will reach. And then the outputs, this is what you will produce with your project. And trained staff, modernized training labs, new teaching material, enhanced international research contacts. This is just the template of the logical framework matrix. So I just put the figures there to see a little bit on which order you can do this. So for the planning, you start from the wider objective, you go down to the specific objective, and then you go to outputs and outcomes, and then how you will reach them by doing which kind of activities. And if you go up, then you say, okay, if I do these activities, then I will deliver these outputs. These outputs will contribute to my objective. And if I reach my specific objective with my project, I will contribute to a larger goal in the end. Just some tips on how do you formulate this. Wider objective is you contribute to something. Specific objective, you really do something with your project. You increase something, you improve something. Your outputs, it's usually formulated in a past participle way. You delivered something, you trained someone, you produced something, and the activities are of course verbs. You are preparing, designing, teaching, training, and so on. So I gave some examples. I also have a PDF example from the European Commission, will I post in the chat, just for you to have a look at afterwards. Something which is often used for how to formulate your goals or your indicators is to make it SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And then the ER goes back to evaluating and re-evaluating, of course. But I'm going a little bit fast now because we're running out of time. I just wanted to give you some concrete examples about, often people write in very general terms, but it's best to make this as specific as possible. Just some examples here. And then at the end, just to recap, address a real problem, involve your stakeholders, first analyze, then plan, start with your logical framework and be consistent with the rest of your proposal and try to formulate it in a smart way. And then I'll just post the LFM in the chat box. It was a little bit very fast, I know.
No, it's okay.
Maybe I wanted to give you too much information.
Oh, thank you, Delphine. It was very enthusiastic about the topic that I also struggle with VLIR. So I will be the next speaker and I will explain you something about VLIR. So I think you explained very good what is the idea of the project cycle management, and that's it. So my question would be if there are some people that have a question for Delphine, or if not, we can just keep it till the end. I'm just going to give a quite short presentation and then we can maybe continue. I don't see any questions or hands, so I assume it's okay that I start my presentation. I'm just going to put it on the slideshow. It might be better for you to see. Just as Delphine, I'm working in the central administration of Ghent University, and I'm working in the research coordination office. And I think that's already a very good news I have for you. Well, I know also for Delphine that is the case, that we are really there to help researchers finding the money somewhere else, giving you the information, giving you the opportunities. So all of you, I hope you are subscribed, if not to the BOSI newsletter. BOSI is short for a Flemish word, but it means actually that's information on research and internationalization. So if you just go to ughent.be/BOSI with a Z, you can subscribe yourself and get all information that at least we have about calls that are coming either in education or in research, and you can use that. Furthermore, you know me now and you know Delphine, so you can contact us, you can ask us questions if you're looking for funding, if you have ideas how we can assist you with that. The word VLIR has been a few times here on the floor. Actually, VLIR, this is their website, and I invite you to have a look at it. There's a short video here. I'm not going to show it now just for the time, but it's very interesting to look at everything that VLIR is doing. Actually, the word VLIR stands for the Flemish abbreviation of Flemish Inter-University Council, and even if we're all the time talking about VLIR, it's actually VLIR UOS to make it completely unpronounceable. But so it's the University Development Corporation, again in Flemish words, ontwikkeling samenwerking. It's money from the Belgian Minister of Development Corporation. So basically a lot of the main budget of the development cooperation of Belgium will go in, humanitarian aid, will go in certain crisis situations to solve problems. But anyway, a budget of about 32 million is given specifically for university cooperation. And that's something that, again, some countries envy us for, that we have this specific cooperation. The idea behind it is, of course, that a country will not be able to solve its own problems if there is also not researchers that are able to do that. So it's a lot about capacity building. What VLIRO-S is doing, apart from giving scholarships, mainly master scholarships, I should say, it's to support projects between a professor, in our case at Ghent University, with a professor in the south, and to jointly attack a problem. And this can be with small projects of 2 or 5, or some longer projects that existed up to 10 years. There are also some short training programs and some projects of policy support. Now I put the map there of the world, so you will see that it's not like VLIRO-S is working with the whole global south. There is a kind of agreement between donors that we should not all be active in all the same countries. And as Belgium is anyway a small country, we have picked about 20 partner countries in Latin America, in Africa and Asia, and we're working with those. So I hope that you will find what you need within those countries. VLIRO-S is working what they call a theory of change. Before, you would say a lot of projects look like this is our problem, and okay, we're going to do something, and this is going to be the output. And VLIRO-S in this theory of change is putting much more the emphasis on where the guy is marking there, then a miracle occurs, and they say, well, we don't want you to hope for a miracle. We want you really to think about what are really the activities you're going to do. And this is just one example that I'm showing to you, which is basically the same idea of the log frame that Delphine was just talking about, where you have, let's say, activities that you're going to do. And so certain activities, you're almost certain that, for example, a researcher will gain some experience, or that something can be set up, and where you, in fact, predict what is going to happen with all that information, with all those activities, and in the end, to hopefully come to the cloud there, which is your dream, in this case, for example, to help small-scale farmers to contribute to better food sovereignty. I'm not going to go too much in detail, but this is how the log frame looks for a VLIR project, where you have, again, the same as Delphine was explaining, general objective and a specific objective, and then you have to specify how you're going to do that, what are your activities, what are going to be the result of that, and how are you able to follow the information. Now, for a lot of you, this is maybe a little bit too far away. If you are still going to embark on your first project with a partner in the Global South, we have, luckily, a budget that's also coming from the same Minister of Development Cooperation, which is given to Ghent University, and actually to every Flemish university, with a specific aim to increase our capacity, our Ghent University capacity, to get better in working with the Global South, to learn more how to do it, to broaden to other domains, not just, medicine or agriculture. Every domain has an important in the Global South, so to have other groups involved in that. To that end, and especially to stimulate young researchers, as all of you are, to try to engage in this field of working with the Global South. The name of this fund is called the Global Minds Fund, and you are very lucky because now you have first-hand information that there are several calls which are open, and I would ask all of you, why wouldn't you give it a try? You are following this webinar of working with the Global South. So for me, that means that probably you have an idea that could help the Global South, or you have a partner in the Global South. So have a look at the different calls that are open, and if there is one that fits your interest. They're very easy accessible. It are short calls, also for limited budgets, as you can see on this slide, but it could give you a first idea about the possibilities. The different types we have is operational grants, which are specifically for, I think, most of you that are listening today. It's for PhDs or postdoctoral researchers. It's not a grant, a scholarship, it's operational. For example, you hold an FWO scholarship or a special research fund scholarship, as Bruno was talking about, but you don't have the budget maybe to go to the South, to go to a country in the Global South where you want to either take samples, test your interviews, and so line of funding gives you the possibility to do that. We also have another type of calls, which we call capacity building, which is more targeted at departments and professors, but you are all working in a department or with some professors, where they actually can ask for a wide range of initiatives to get them to embark on working with the Global South. They can have, for example, make a mission to a country in the South to check what is the situation of the lab there. Is this a lab that we could work together with? It's also about getting to know each other. It's about personal contacts that are the most successful ones in our experience to continue. A third group is sensitizing. It's the one that has less competition. There is not so much interest from the traditional, let's say from professors to participate. It's really about events, and this is also open for students and student associations. Events where you could help, let's say, or you could give information to the students, to the academics, or even to the public at large about some issues that are important for the Global South. And last, but surely not the least one, is the short research stay, where even maybe friends or colleagues that you have that have been maybe in Belgium before, maybe they did their master studies or they did their PhD studies, and they would like to come back for a short stay. And in that short time that they would come back, they could help to write a proposal for VLIR that I mentioned before, for example, or for another organization. And so it allows you again to be in touch. All the calls are on the website that's mentioned there, so please have a look at this. I do realize that in these difficult COVID times, a lot of this has to do with mobility and meeting people and seeing local situations, and that might be still not possible for some time. But we did anyway decide to launch the call. For those of you that would apply, we ask you to think about what could be a plan B. If I don't get this proposal, or if the traveling is not possible, but that's the good news, I think, to end my presentation with, that there are already some calls which I think are readily open without a lot of restrictions for all of you. So again, my name is Nancy, and I was kind of organizing this webinar. And I'm also asked to fill in. I'm going to try to go back. Yes. So we're gonna stop sharing. All right. I also was putting in the chat the link for the survey that I was asked to share it with you to fill it in later. So this brings us more or less timely. We still have some more minutes, of course, to discuss if there are more questions, either to me or any of the other speakers. And feel free to leave the meeting whenever you have to do something else. So some questions. Yes, I see you already asked. You have a question? I don't hear you asked. Your microphone is still silent.
Would it be possible to share the PowerPoint presentations?
Yes, I was also going to mention that. So I have everybody's PowerPoint presentation of the speakers, and I will also share them with all of you that attended the meeting. I also made a recording of the meeting, and I think that even I will be able to publish it here within this link. So if you will go back to the link of the meeting, you probably will find it, because it might be too big to send it to you by email. But yep. Let's keep in touch, and I will surely do the presentations. It's on my short list to do that. Somebody else that has some input, that has some questions, things that maybe were not covered this afternoon, things that you were maybe hoping to hear more about and you did not, please also put that in the survey, because we have a lot of people on the waiting list for this seminar. So it will be very interesting to know what did you miss, what did you expect that was not there, and then I can also fine tune it for a next session again.
I have a question, Nancy.
Yes, Francois.
Are you organizing trainings?
Yes, Francois was asking if we are organizing trainings. Yes, actually from the research department, and again for that, please all of you follow this BOSI newsletter. There are regular trainings, not just, for example, myself, I will give a writing probably somewhere at the end of, towards the end of this year about VLIR, because of VLIR to be launched very soon. And then I always give an information session about how do you tackle this specific donor, this VLIR, and I will go much more in detail about, okay, what do you have to take care about? How do you approach a log frame? But also my colleagues from Horizon 2020 will give specific also sessions about Horizon 20 funding. And as Delphine was also mentioning, she herself is also giving trainings. Usually it's linked to a call that's open, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to give it when there is no opportunity for funding. But we do indeed give a lot of, we do give trainings.
Yes, I asked this question because the lesson is don't wait for a call. You have to prepare at least 1 year in advance. And I think that's what I got from Bruno. Don't get frustrated, write several proposals, and inshallah, one day you will get the right opportunity. And what I also understand is that at the end, a lot depends on a strong coordinator. So as a beginner, don't feel discouraged. You are not alone in this business. There are many people who have experience, who went through ups and downs, and try to get into a consortia where you know this was successful and try to pitch in.
Yes, Francois, I agree with you. Of course, that good idea. It's always good to start writing your ideas. And I think some of the speakers today have maybe given you some ideas about, okay, how should I tackle my problem? And you can check it with some colleagues, like, what do you think about this idea and how I try to sell it in a way. And when there is a call, you will be ready. What I mean is that we're giving information sessions for specific funders, so that you can maybe fine tune your idea to go into a certain call. But you're surely right. Networking is very important for everybody. Make sure they know you, even with little contributions, and that's it. I see there's another question. Mohammed, please.
Thanks for all the presentation for this session. Just wondering, for the Global Mind Fund, the operational grant, what is the success rate for this one, and in comparison to the other 3 different calls from the Global Mind? Actually,
are, I would say, very little competitive, because we really have a nice budget to fund those little calls. You also see that it's very little budget. The main problem is that it's not readily possible for everybody to fit in the call. I mean, you are limited to those, to a little bit more than the 20 partner countries of LIR-OS. So it actually goes over the 30 countries which are in the Belgium Development Cooperation, which is a little bit more. But for example, Mohamed, you were saying that you were from Egypt, right? That would be a country that's, for example, not on the list. So if your idea would be to start something again. With Egypt, well, that's bad luck because it's not there. So that's already one of the restrictions.
Sorry for interruption. I'm just asking not about the eligibility criteria, about the success rate for the eligible project.
Yeah, no, the success rate is really high. I would say almost 3/4 of the proposals get it, and those are really also good proposals. I mean, the one that don't make it is because they don't really fit very good what I explained before. Read good what Global Minds is about. It's about Ghent University, your department, getting better in working with the Global South. For example, your professor is not active yet in the Global South, or not a lot. And because you are there, you are going to make a connection with the Global South, and that can be the beginning of a future story. So it's a quite good success rate. Yes, Ast?
It's regarding the list of the countries. It's available online?
Yes, of course. If you go to the vlireos.be website, there you can look with countries, and you will see the countries that are on the list. And that was actually where I took the little map of the country, where you could see the countries that are there. So 50% of them are on the African continent, and yeah, very few is actually in Latin America and Asia, only a few countries. Valentine, I think you were putting also your hand, or yes?
Yes. I would like to ask about the Global Mind. Like for me, I'm in the Global South. I'm in Africa, in Rwanda. Am I eligible for applying for this Global Mind?
You mean you're physically at home now? You're physically in? Well, I should think about that. I think with this Corona situation, of course, the primarily thing is you have to be a UGent PhD student. You have to be enrolled as a UGent PhD student. Yes. You need some operational funding to do something that's important for your PhD. Well, basically, if your PhD, of course, is exactly why you are in your home country doing what you're doing, then it's not really additional, how would I call it? It's not capacity building for your department if you're going to do what you're already doing within your PhD. It has to be sort of additional to your PhD. But, well, I would suggest, Valentine, just read the Global Minds call and read the part on the operational grants. And if you have any doubts, you can always contact me and ask me for some more explanations, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. If there are no more questions, I know it's a long time, 2 hours to watch a screen, and sometimes not always a live face, but just some slides. I feel myself tired, even if I knew most of the slides from before. So thank you all to stay with us till the end. Thanks again to all the speakers for their nice contribution and for making this a very diverse and interesting afternoon. All of you have our contacts. You're always free to ask us any more questions later on by email if you're not comfortable to ask them now. Online in this forum, and you will get the presentations and maybe also the recording of the whole afternoon, so you can always listen back to some parts that you want to have another listen. And please fill in the survey. It's very interesting for us to know what we can do better next time. All right, so maybe you can just show some faces again and just wave bye to everybody. Take care, everybody. Stay healthy, stay safe. All right. Bye, everybody.
See you soon.